I
want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Tonight's speaker is Frank Shoemaker. He's a club member and our webmaster. Tonight he's going to be discussing the images he's taken, starting with Halley's Comet back in the mid-'80s, all the way to the present. Most of his photos are current, and he's going to talk about how he made them and how he processed them. And Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see if I can get it up here on PowerPoint.
You want to sit up, my friends.
Well, while you're close. Okay. These are just images that I've taken that have an astronomical bent to them over a number of decades. Let me see if I can get control of my computer here because my mouse isn't where I want it to be, but that's okay. I bought my first camera with paper route money back in the 60s. So I've been doing this for a while. Almost all these images I'm going to show you were shot with Canon full-frame DSLRs. Only the first image was made with film. And there's a couple of drone shots in here as well, which you can actually use for astronomical images. For shot planning purposes, I use photographer's ephemeris a lot, which helps me find where the sun and the moon will be. That's available as an app on your phone or at app.photoephemeris.com. I use Heavens Above to find satellite passes, ISS, and so on. And Google Maps for planning. In these kinds of shots, planning is a big deal. For image preparation and processing, I use Adobe Lightroom for cataloging, organizing, and for most of my image processing. I use Photoshop for more complex processing when it involves layers and masks. And add-ins such as Topaz Labs, Denoise AI, and Sharpen AI. These are new tools that have been out just in the last couple of years. They're using artificial intelligence, and what Denoise AI does for the noise in an image is unbelievable. It's just amazing how good it is. For astro processing is Star Stacks and Deep Sky Stacker, and then also PixInsight. And for time-lapse processing, I use LR time-lapse. So that's the software I use afterward. My guiding principles are patience, persistence, and attention to detail. That, of course, that works for any aspect of life, right? And also, my attitude is when I press the shutter button, I'm not even halfway yet to the picture I want. So I usually spend more time in post than I do actually getting the image in the first place. And I found it usually takes 2 or 3 attempts to get the shot that I want. So, you know, I'm willing to go back and try again if when I get it back on the computer, it's not to my satisfaction. So, okay, here's, this is Halley's Comet from March of '86. This was shot, because the only image I'm going to show you tonight was shot on film. This was a Pentax single lens reflex. I shot with Fuji 1600 ISO film, and this is a pop quiz. When I had the image processed, I had them push it to 3200 ISO, or as we called it in those days, ASA. Right? So what does it mean to push process an image? No one knows.
You increase the sensitivity of the,
Huh?
you increase the effective sensitivity of the emulsion in processing.
Yeah, in chemistry. Was there?
I don't know the chemistry now.
I don't either.
Yeah, did you used to keep the 1600 all the way up to 3200 ASA film in a refrigerator?
Well, this is the only time I shot that film because I knew I wanted 1600 ASA ISO. So normally I was shooting tri-expand at 400 ASA and that sort of thing. but this I wanted to shoot, and, you know, you can see, it's a little hard to make out, but here's the teapot. Halley's was right, you know, right next to the Milky Way. That was shot in Tucson, Arizona, and the story behind it was, I had never been in the desert before. This is 30 or 40 miles outside of Tucson, where I went out to shoot it. And I went to the Saguaro Desert Museum, and I was there just looking around. And then I asked one of the people there, I said, you know, I'm going to be shooting out in the desert in the middle of the night. Is there anything I need to worry about, you know, animal-wise out there? And he said, you're going to hear the coyotes, but they won't bother you. And so I was set up on the side of a road in the middle of nowhere out there. And while, you know, I had the tripod and whatnot set up, you could hear rustling in the bushes around the sides of the road. And then they started howling. And it's a good thing that that ranger told me I didn't have to worry about it, because that tripod would still be sitting right now if I had known to not worry about the
You don't have to, really don't worry, meaning they don't come to you.
I never saw them. I could hear them walking around in the brush.
Multiple?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
they generally don't bother humans.
yeah,
Been like 1 or 2 coyote attacks.
yeah. I was, well, now I'm seeing pictures on Facebook. I live in Westlake of people that see coyotes all the time in Westlake. They're out there, so.
You don't leave your dog out at night.
Well, again, one of the animal wardens in Westlake told me that there's a lot fewer rabbits around now because of the coyotes.
Yeah.
Not in the metro forest.
All right, why can't I change to the next slide? There we go. It's a transit of Venus, shot out of an open window in my house on the 2nd story. So this is back in June of 12. My daughter was assisting. This is the day she graduated from high school. So she was helping me get that shot. In all my shots, I show you the technical characteristics of the shot. I'll be glad to answer any questions about them. This was in the Santa Fe Desert, outside Santa Fe, New Mexico, with a full moon coming up with lightning around it. I went out to shoot the sunset, and there wasn't much of a sunset. And I turned around, and here was this thunderstorm going by, and the full moon was coming up. And that night, I came back to the hotel with 70 images with lightning in them. It was amazing. It was just the storm that wouldn't stop.
How did you shoot that?
How did I shoot it? Well, it was definitely one of those right place, right time shots, right? I mean, it was, I hadn't intended to get the moon. This was shot from Bay Village by Lake Erie, 7 years ago now. It's a composite of a bunch of shots. And what I like about this is how you can see the refraction of the moon as it gets down to the horizon. It was incredibly clear that night, right down to the horizon. So that's a composite of a bunch of shots. Obviously.
Frank, you try using your pointer on your laptop so that you can see your phone.
Oh, okay, let's see.
If you can figure out the tools on that.
If I can figure it out. Yeah, it's not letting me take the mouse where I wanted to. There. Okay. So this was a shot. This is another kind of a shot you can plan with photographers' ephemeris, because I knew that on that night the moon was going to set near where the sun was setting. So I went out and got the sun setting, and then the moon came along and set shortly after that. So this is another composite. These are the kinds of shots I assemble in Photoshop. Let's see, next shot. This is the Detroit Superior Bridge. I shot it down on the flats, full moon. I got it to align nicely with the lamp.
How far back? Where were you?
I was down in the flats below the
that's
bridge.
right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It was one of the things that I'll mention in this is that in Cleveland we're fortunate because of the layout of the city along the lake and other aspects I'll talk about to get some nice alignment of astronomical objects with landscape objects. So here's the full lunar eclipse from 2014. I took a few shots. This was shot from Bay Village of moon coming down and eventually getting into the trees. And I shot a number of images that night. When I got back to, and got them on the computer, I realized that, what is this? It's Uranus.
Really?
It happened to be right by the moon.
Wow.
Yep.
I didn't realize it when I was out shooting. It wasn't until I got it back on the computer that I saw. I said, what is this? So, because it looked like Uranus, the green color, but it was a heck of an alignment. Another example that, this is the Lorraine Lighthouse. It lines up with the sun and the moon at different times of the year. It's just a really fortunate alignment to get it. And again, this is the kind of shot that you develop with photographers ephemeris, and you know that if you're there and it's clear, you'll get that. This is a shot from Zion National Park. It's the top of a trail that leads back into the to the end of this box canyon. So you're looking down the canyon toward the west. You can still see some light from the setting sun back here, but and then those are cars working their way up the canyon. So it's just an interesting shot. When I walked back to my car, it was dark and I had a flashlight. It's the only time I've ever seen an actual wild tarantula. It was on the path in front of me. It stepped gingerly around him.
And you lost another tripod.
What's that?
And you lost another tripod.
Yeah, somebody probably picked it up.
Yeah, the one in the turret.
There's another one, 180 degree view of the Milky Way panorama, also from Zion. Very dark place. That was in August, so. This is a shot from Avon on the Norfolk and Southern tracks, which are east-west tracks out there. So if you can get out around the eclipse, or around the equinox, then you'll get the sun or the moon coming up over the tracks. Another shot set up with it. Another example of alignment of the celestial objects with the city around Cleveland. We are really fortunate. This is a shot that occurs in basically November, December, January. Those three full moons that come up more or less over the city. Now that's a composite shot because there's no way you can get the city in the moon in a single frame because there's just so many stops difference in brightness. The moon is so bright on a night like this. So that was shot in January. And at the same time, I had another camera out there, and I shot, now let's see if I can make this work. This is actually a video I shot that was going on at the same time. And the clouds helped. When I put that video on Facebook, it got 100,000 likes. Yeah. Now, the trick is to get past this. Oh, it worked. Am I going too fast?
No, good pace.
Okay. One of the things I try to get are very young moons. This one is 39 hours old. Shot this on the Norfolk and Southern tracks. Shot at 600 millimeters. A friend of mine said, "What the hell were you doing on the tracks with the train coming?" And I said, "Well, that train was more than a mile away when I shot that image because it was still, this crossing here is about half a mile away. So it was, you know, how, very telephoto lenses like that.
So you were able to get your tripod out of there?
Yes, I was.
So we can lose another.
Didn't get run over.
Also shows how Frank loses.
I like what the telephoto lens does to the, telephone poles, the utility
Yeah,
poles.
Yeah, these are actually very tall, you know, these are very high powered lines. They're, you know, 60, maybe 100 feet tall, going out for miles along those tracks. But,
Is that a composite?
no, that's a single image, single shot.
At what time?
Um,
What time of day?
Well, it was not, you know, any very thin crescent moon like that is gonna be visible only for a little while after sunset. It's gonna set shortly after it, so the sky is still bright in the west. This is looking west. So, I don't know the time of day, it was in September. It would have been around 6:30 maybe in the evening, something like that.
You use any filters?
I'm sorry?
Use any filters? Color
Not with
filters?
that, no. The problem with shooting this kind of shot is that the moon is not that much brighter than the sky, right? It's so thin, and the sky is still very bright. This business here with the locomotive and its lights, that's all blown out on the image, but that's okay. It lit up the tracks, and that was the kind of shot I was looking for. But the tracks here in Bay and along Westlake are really due east and west. So around the equinox, you'll get this sort of an alignment.
Who's the best time and everything?
This is a shot from the garage at Cleveland Clinic. This is the next day. And these are images, this is a composite. Those images are about a minute apart, maybe two. And I was able to get the moon all the way down in between the buildings. I guess I should be using the pointer, shouldn't I, Kai? Down here. So, most people say, take a shot like this once every minute. I take it once every 15 seconds. And then, depending upon the alignment, I'll pick every fourth image out so that I can get, you know, a minute apart, but then I can pick out shots that you know, get behind the building and below the building like that.
Are you bracketing each of those as well as you go?
Am I what?
Are you bracketing each of your, every
No,
interval?
with the sky still kind of bright and the moon not all that bright in the city, the dynamic range wasn't that huge in the shot. Probably some of the top of Key Tower is blown out. And these are lights from Progressive Field. There were a game going on that night, but that's very bright. But the rest of it, the dynamic image, the dynamic range wasn't all that great. Let's see. Same night, different moment, longer lens. That one,
That's 100 millimeters?
it's cropped.
Okay.
You know, I think I was fortunate to get some detail on the moon.
Yeah.
A very clear night, a very transparent
Surprised
sky.
you didn't get any earth shine.
Hmm?
You said I'm surprised you didn't get any earth shine.
There is a little bit, it doesn't show up on the projector, but you can see it here. It's faint.
Zoom. You can see it on Zoom. Now you're all glad you showed up.
Yeah.
Just imagine.
Yeah, the projector doesn't show it, but it's there. Anti-corpuscular rays. This was shortly before sunrise in Massachusetts, at Rockport, Massachusetts. I was out shooting early. Wasn't much of a sunrise, but you know, one of the things about a photographer's motto is always turn around and see what's behind you. And there was this. It's the only time I've ever remember seeing him, certainly the only time I've ever photographed them. But they were quite distinct in the sky. So that was a fun shot. Milky Way from Maine. This is near the ocean. In one of the, this is a tidal backwater off the Kennebec River.
New landings.
very dark. Now, this is the opposite side of the country. This is from the Oregon coast. Part of the appeal to shooting the Oregon coast is they have these nice rocks in the water, right? Which gives you something in the foreground, because when, my attitude when shooting a landscape or an astronomical shot like this is you really want to put something in the foreground if you can. And so the ocean there worked out well. Being an Ohio boy, I'm not used to tide, so I was shooting right down by the water. And then I had to keep backing up because the tide was coming in on me.
Almost lost another tripod.
While I was shooting. Another lost tripod. It's getting expensive,
Expensive, huh?
Yes, it is.
This is a panorama of a number of shots across with the moon just setting and then the Milky Way above with some clouds. Pretty much the same location, but higher up, away from the water. This is the solar eclipse near St. Louis. My son-in-law, this is his parents' house, which is by far the biggest house I've ever been in. It's enormous, but it was right in the path of totality. So I took my daughters down there and my son-in-law to hang out in this enormous house. These are tricky shots to get because there's such an enormous difference. So I shot 5 exposures, 3 stops apart, giving me an effect of 15 stops. Because the light right by the limb of the sun is about 14 stops brighter than the edges of the image. So this is another shot that took a lot of planning to get right.
You got a flare.
Yeah, there's one over here.
That was 2017.
Yeah, right around there. Here's more flares. There's some here, and then there's some up along this edge as well.
How much did you get to see visually, given you were doing all this shooting?
Well, with 2 minutes and 40 seconds of totality, I think it was, it's like, I did try to look up from the camera.
Yeah, I took like 2 or 3 shots, and I remember thinking, wow, I wasted so much time with my head down on the camera.
To me, what was amazing is what the sky began to look like in the last minute or so before totality. It got a kind of a steely, strange color to it. It's the first time I've ever been in totality like that.
Yep.
2024, right? We've
Yep.
got another big one coming. So there's a diamond ring with a little bit of flaring over here. Shot on my backyard, not a great shot in my opinion.
On your backyard.
Yeah, in this house.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what about my backyard?
You said something about it not being
Not
very
being that
good,
great.
and you were like,
Well, because the galactic center is blown out down here, so. But this was shot with a normal DSLR and a 400 millimeter photographic lens, guided, 50 subs, 30 darks.
so is that 210 of total exposure across your 50 subs, or I presume?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Each were like
Well,
4
yeah.
seconds or so?
You know what? That's wrong. It's not 210 seconds total. I think they were probably 30 seconds subs, so.
Okay, yeah.
50, been 25 minutes of exposure plus the darts. So, but now I have a real telescope, and winters are coming, so it'll be back again if it's clear. Another alignment. It's unbelievable the alignments we have. That is a setting moon, not rising. So it was shot just before dawn, about 20 minutes before sunrise, so that there was still a lot of light to light up the lighthouse. And I was way back, almost a mile to the lighthouse away, but these were photographers out on the pier in front of me.
Oh,
And when I put it on Facebook, a bunch of them were saying, hey, that's me. That's me. I'm the second one from the right.
oh my God,
Um,
that's like amazing.
So, this was a shot that I had in mind, because it happens in December, that I had in mind for 3 or 4 years, and finally the weather cooperated. So I got out there early in the morning.
Have you sold any of these, National Geographic?
I have some stuff up on the web, and I sold a few pieces, but
Yeah.
if I did it to eat, I would weigh less than I do right
I don't
now.
know about that, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I'd starve. This is Palouse Falls in western New York, or Washington State, shot in June. Those falls are 200 feet high. They're almost twice as high as Niagara Falls. And the night I went out there to shoot, there were some other guys there that were lighting up the area with some lights so that the cliffs got lit. And then I used light painting to light up the falls on that. It's about it's a 12-shot panorama going across. So let's see. DLA. When I went to visit, it happened to be that the telescopes were all in the middle, not spread out over all the many miles of those tracks, which helped. And to help, if you're not familiar with this, just to give you a sense of the size of these telescopes, that's a staircase right there. And so is this down here. So to get up to the top, you climb up these stairs here. You know, it's New Mexico where storms come and go. And a storm came through and rained a bit, and then I managed to get that.
Any shots of the garage?
I did have shots of the garage.
Sometimes if there's somebody working on one of them, that's a good scale shot.
Yeah, yeah. This was on my way out. It was about to get dark. This is shot from about a mile away. They moved the telescopes around on a pair of railroad tracks, not just one. There's a pair of them. So you can see the two tracks there, and then shooting down to the middle where I guess the apex you call it, where all the telescopes sit. I think if I had shown up on a day that they happened to be, I think they were probably doing maintenance, because they're all just pointing straight up in the sky. They're not, actually in use, I think, at that point. But I consider myself fortunate that they were all together, which makes them much more photogenic, This is a composite shot I put together. The foreground with the road is actually taken from a drone shot in the middle of the day. This is the high desert in New Mexico. And then I added the mountains from another shot and the Milky Way from the third shot. So it's this 3-image composite. It's really a fantasy shot. You would never see it looking just like that. This is also from Washington State on that trip. That's actually me here. That's a selfie of me walking back to the car to get the other camera while this thing was shooting away. So this was on a farm. Out in Palouse, if you're familiar with that part of Washington, it's just rolling hills with wheat on them and canola. This is the Perseids from a few years ago, shot down at Salt Fork. There's 21 meteors in the image, and so it's a 21-shot composite of them all, with the northern part of the Milky Way showing up in the image.
Now, when you say 30 seconds, is that the total on a composite, or is that 30 seconds each shot?
Each.
Okay.
What I did was I set the camera out and I put an intervalometer on it to shoot 30-second images once every 35 seconds. So I figure I had the camera open 30 out of 35 seconds. That's a pretty good ratio for just snagging, the meteors coming along.
Yeah.
So that worked out. This is Flagstaff's, the Clark 24-inch refractor. They had an open house, and because it's a handheld shot inside the dome, obviously. That's the original dome from way back when, that Percival Lowell was, seeing the canals on Mars. This was shot at ISO 12,800 because it was very dark, and then I processed it through Topaz Labs denoise AI, which is a miracle tool, I think. Even though it was handheld, you could see a few stars outside the shutter up on the dome. So that was a memorable night. Just a little ways down the road from the Lowell Observatory is the meteor crater, which is another awesome site. I mean, it's hard to grasp how big the thing is, even when you're standing on the edge of it, how deep it is. They have some human-sized dummies or figures down inside, so you can barely see them. I mean, they're just little specks down in here.
They're all going like,
So this is a drone shot from outside, looking down on it. This is the visitor center over here. So the previous shot was shot from over here, looking that way. It had clouded up by the time we left. So another drone shot of Cedar Point with the full moon coming up behind it. I was over on the shore at Sandusky, so the drone was about 2 miles away when I made this shot. But the moon was kind enough to come out from behind the clouds just at the right time. This is a very young, in 32 hours, that's about the youngest I've had so far. This is an old moon rising just before dawn over downtown. Another example of a shot that was, well aligned with the buildings in Cleveland. We're fortunate that way. Then this shot is 2 weeks later at the full moon. This one was taken from Bay Village, which is, instead of being about 3 miles away, the first one was taken from Edgewater Park. This one is from Bay. The first one's about 3 miles away, this one's about 14 miles away. Which, what I did was I combined the two shots this way to show you how big the moon appears when you can get back from the subject. So at 12 miles away, the moon looks gigantic. At 3 miles away, not so big. But then I merged the two shots together, so the buildings are all in scale with one another. So the one on the right was the first one, and then 2 weeks later for the full moon coming up. This is just a shot of the crescent moon with Venus right by it from a couple years ago. And it was a very clear night. You can see a bunch of gulls sitting on the water over here. And then I noticed the reflection here, especially the reflection of Venus. So I went and shot that by itself and got that. And I thought, you know what, there's a shot in this. The river was pretty still, not a lot of breeze. So this is a shot that I made later, a couple weeks later, in the Rocky River. It's shooting the reflection of Venus off the still water. And it's composite of a handful of images together. So I call it Venus scribbles, on the water. Then we get to the comet. So this is from last summer, this is the first shot I got of it, about 4 in the morning, down at Edgewater Park. Just as it was getting light in the east. This was looking toward the east. And then in the days ahead from that point, it became an evening object. This was out of Lorraine Harbor, an amazing alignment, I think. And there were a bunch of guys out shooting this thing. And they light up the lighthouse, it's illuminated until 11 o'clock, and then the lights go out. And at 11 o'clock, a bunch of those guys packed up and left. And I thought, you know what, that's a big mistake, because this was so bright, the lighthouse was so bright with the lights on it, it really blew out the comet. But once they turned the lights off, and it was just the ambient light from the city and whatnot, they got much better balance in the brightness between the lighthouse and the comet. And
Is that by
wound up with
chance
this
the
shot.
aurora across the lake there?
I'm sorry?
Is that by chance the aurora across the lake there?
No, you know what that is? That's Detroit.
That's Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go down to the lake at Huntington, it's very easy to see the lights from Detroit. Yeah, because this shot is actually looking kind of northwest, toward the city. Another shot with Trevor's favorite tree, because Trevor kissed his wife for the first time underneath that tree.
See what you learned?
Too much information.
You know, the comet was nice enough to line up with it. Then I went out to California a couple days later to see my daughter who lives out there, and this is up on the California coast, a few hours north of San Francisco, and I actually picked up a little bit of the Ion Trail on it as well, which takes pretty dark skies. It's pretty dark up there. This one is just a shot of the comet with the setting crescent moon off the California coast with some rocks in the foreground, you know, some stones. And then from the same spot looking south toward the Milky Way, the bright lights is Fort Bragg, California, which is a pretty big town. For that part of the coast, California is very remote up there. Pretty big town, but not big enough to have a Walmart. And then up here is, you know, this is from last summer, so here's Jupiter and Saturn. They've exchanged places now. Drone shot early in the morning, and if it's still out, I can get a 4-second exposure on a drone, and it's still solid. It's not, you know, it's not blurred. If there's much wind, forget it. But it was very still, and I like this shot because I got a reflection of Venus on the water. And, you know, this is shot at 4:30, so there's, well, that's light from Cleveland on the right, over there in the distance, in Lorraine, probably. So this is about a year ago. This is just a pretty shot of the crescent moon, Seneca Lake, Ohio. I went down there to try and get some shots. It was a little disappointing because there was a lot of lights around with the cabins and marinas and whatnot. But it was still fairly dark. But I managed to get this shot. And what I liked about it is, because it is fairly dark, it's hard to see the dipper up in the sky, but it's easy to see it in the reflection of the water. Cool. So, you know, reflections are about 3 stops darker than the sky. So I exposed it to get that instead of the sky. Here's Trevor's favorite tree again, with a different view. This is stacked in star stacks, which is Very easy to use, very good program, and it's free. It's a freebie, so.
What is the name of the program?
STARSTAX, Star
Oh,
Stacks,
Stars.
yeah. It's several hours of exposures. And Star Stacks gives you the ability, they have what they call comet mode, which trails the lights from the stars a little bit. But, you know, you can get an idea by looking at an individual star path. So that's, you know, that's probably an hour's exposure, 15 degrees, something like that.
I noticed on the left it says former tree. Does this no longer exist?
They took it down.
Oh.
They took it down, yeah. Couldn't believe it.
Oh.
It's my favorite tree of all time. And there's a million pictures of it. But yeah, the Metro Parks took it down because they said it was rotting. And this is, Gary, that's Detroit. Over there on the left. Another drone shot of the full moon rising over Pittsburgh. Where the Allegheny River on the left and the Monongahela on the right come together to make the Ohio River. So, I shot this on my way up to the Adirondacks. Again, photographer's ephemera said it's going to be right over the city. So, this is from the Adirondacks. First time I was shooting around lakes a lot, and small lakes, not like Lake Erie. And boy, as soon as the sun goes down, they start misting up. And you can see the mist on the lake here and over here. There's Jupiter, Saturn, Milky Way, partly obscured. This is a drone shot way after dark. Full moon, with just a huge amount of mist billowing up off the lake. And once I got it back on the computer, I realized, hey, I got the Pleiades. So they showed up. This was shot down at Hinckley Lake. I was a little surprised because it's looking north right at the lights from Cleveland. We got pretty good star trails for someplace that's not all that remote. This was shot last December. Star stacks again, but you can see how far more lights there are in the sky compared to the reflections off the water, which, because of that 3-stop difference. M42, this was shot with a Stellaview 80 millimeter and a Canon 6D that I had modified to have the IR filter taken out of the camera. I'm my worst critic. The center of the nebula is kind of blown out, so it's coming back again for winter. I'll get it better next time. Here we are this past June with the partially eclipsed sun rising over the lake. Fortunately, it came through the clouds.
I pulled over on 71 to take a look at it. A couple rolled up behind me, wondered what I was doing.
That's Cedar Point from Vermilion, about 17 miles away. There's only a few days during the year when it sets behind Cedar Point, as seen from Vermilion. But very long lens, 700 millimeter. And you can see some of the other rides there, like
Did you do anything with the hue on that picture?
Well, yes. My attitude is, the picture is what I say it is.
Yes.
So, I just adjust it to the point where it pleases me, whatever that means.
Where the artistry comes in.
What's that?
Where artistry comes in.
Yeah,
That's right.
yep. Yep, I mean, it's the technical side, showing up at the right time, the right place, with the right lens, and in the right weather. And then when you get back on the computer, I just came back from a trip to Maine a couple of weeks ago, and I stopped at the Corning Glass Museum in Corning, New York on the way out. This is the first failed casting. It cracked. The mold cracked while they were casting it. So that's 20 tons of Pyrex glass scrap. They have it set up there, and then it's hard to see how big it is in the left-hand picture. This is in the gift shop on the floor below. So you can see they have this big pedestal here with the mirror resting on the thing.
And the web is gonna be even bigger.
Yeah,
And
it's
in the frickin' space.
it's a large piece of glass. But they have it there, and it was pretty cool, I thought. This is from Maine, hands down the darkest place I've ever been. Darker than the Arizona desert. This shot, however, was made before dawn. You can see, it's hard to make out, but here's Orion, there's the belt, and there's the sword. But the light was coming on from the dawn enough to light the hill in the background. In Maine, that's about 700 feet above the lake. They call those mountains, but most people would call that a hill. Another very, 38-hour-old moon setting. When I first got to this spot, I couldn't even make out the moon. So Photographer's Ephemeris has an augmented reality feature where you can hold it up and it shows you where the moon is. So I was able to look and find it. And this is a very heavily processed shot because with the clouds, the moon was very low contrast. But that was setting, and this to me was a great evening because I got out there before dark, got the moon setting, and then Venus came along, and I got its reflection on the water, and there's some stars from Antares up there. And then once that set, and it got dark, and the Milky Way came out. This is shot with an older camera, and the pond was just, it's like glass. You can see the reflections from it. This is the shot I made with the older camera, but with an ordinary 180 millimeter lens with a 2x adapter, so equivalent to 360 millimeter. I started the camera running when the Pleiades came up above the trees, and I just let it run all night long. I came out the next morning, it was already light out. I had a dew heater on the lens, otherwise it would have been, it was dripping water on the outside. So it's about 530-second exposures, plus flats, darks, and bias shots. This was processed in PixInsight. And I don't believe the image is done yet. I still need to I'm still trying to figure out PixInsight, which is a whole complexity of its own. But very dark location. So it's the only place I've ever been where you could look around the horizon and not see lights from any town. This camp I was at, when you leave the paved roads onto dirt roads, you have to drive 27 more miles to get back to this campus. It's extremely remote. No power, no internet, no cell, except if you climb to the top of that mountain. Then you can get a little bit of cell service. And the owners of the camp run a generator for a few hours each day so you can charge your batteries. That's it. Are you glad to answer any questions now or afterward?
Do you belong to the Cleveland Photographic Society?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, you do, so do I.
yeah.
But I don't do pictures like that.
Well, this is kind of a specialized sort of photography, more so than daytime landscape type shots, which I shoot all the time. But this is just a part of it, so.
You're fabulous.
Yes, and thank you.
You plan to do anything with the partial eclipse this month, the moon?
Yes, I'm gonna be out of town, but I'm coming back the day of the night that it's gonna happen, and if the weather's good, what I wanna do is put the telescope on it, track it right on through from beginning to end, and see what I can make composite-wise out of that. There's another one in May, that I think is a little more favorable situation, I wanna shoot that. In the moment I can make, for the 24 eclipse, I'm planning on going to Texas or someplace like that that will have assurance of better weather. The moment I can make a reservation, I will, to head down there. I think that's probably the best bet.
Paul says you need to come down to Big Cypress in the winter to capture Centaurus A and Omega Centauri.
That would be fun. Yeah. More questions? Thank you.